There we go. So Tetanus is a super sketchy Carter Talon 150cc gy6 buggy. I impulse bought this about 2 years ago on Father's Day. It popped up for $100 and I just couldn't pass up a buggy for $100. Now the previous owners did tell me that it had wiring issues and didn't run, and that was true, to be fair. But what they didn't tell me was that the frame was, and still is, horribly rotten. Now, we'll get to the frame in a minute. Elephant in the room first. Why is there a Barbie bike tied on to the back of Tetanus? Because I was at an event, I had a Barbie bike, and I thought it would be funny. Yeah, so there's a Barbie bike on there now. So let's talk about the engine. 150cc gy6, nothing too fancy there. Now the previous owners actually bought this cart for $200, thinking they could get it running, and never got it to run, and then sold it to me to $100. So they kind of lost out on there. But it turns out that in addition to the wiring problems, the top end was also completely wiped out. There was no crosshatch left in the cylinder. They must have been running it without an air filter. So it has an eBay top end kit in it now. The shroud, I think this is like a goof fit or something. I don't know. It's from Amazon and it's absolute junk. It doesn't even fit its own bolt holes. So yeah, that was a bad purchase. I cleaned out the carburetor, didn't rebuild anything in it, just cleaned it out. So we've got the proper uni filter that they put on these when they upgrade them, but I didn't want to spend the money on a fancy intake. So this is the old radiator hose from my Bronco, which happened to fit with a little piece of pipe, and it works. Had to put in a new CDI, new starter solenoid, new regulator rectifier. Had to rebuild the reverse gearbox because the gears had basically exploded and I wanted reverse. The clutch was in really bad shape, so we got a new clutch to go with it. $22 Amazon Power Sports battery in the back. Now when I got it, I converted the fuel petcock because it had vacuum petcock and that sucks. So I converted it, but then eventually the fuel wasn't flowing fast enough. So now we have a Murray lawnmower fuel tank. We had a different fuel tank on there, but the first test drive out, it spilled gas everywhere. So now it's got this one, and it's got this fuel shut off, which you have to shut off because if you don't, well, chances are it's going to flood out the entire engine if you leave it sitting long enough. The seat is from a new Beetle. If you need a seat for a project, don't ever use one of these Volkswagen seats. They're utter garbage. This thing was brand new, or not brand new, but it was in perfect condition when I put it in, aside from that, and it ended up like this almost immediately, and it's been covered. So these are junk, don't ever use them. Now let's take a look at the frame, which is the worst part of this cart. It is Swiss cheese. This is a main frame rail, and you can see through it. It's like this all the way around. This cart is literally held together by the cage and the side rails. If you look right here, there's supposed to be a support there. There's nothing. You can see here where I've added some bracing, and this is what the metal looked like before. I can stick my finger inside the old frame rail. Now I had to add that bracing because that bar came loose, and that bar connects to the gas pedal. So when that bar came loose, basically when you go to give it gas, you get nothing, all the gas, which didn't really work. So we put that in. Now I got this thing running, and it just kind of sat around for a very long time. We did try to take it out to Ocala, and that went horribly wrong. It spilled gas everywhere. It was stuck constantly. This tire came off the bead and the rim just started spinning, and we burned up the clutch trying to get it back to the trailer. But we did learn that day that two mini bikes can tow a gy6 buggy. So it once again went into the backyard until about a week ago when I took it to the 24 Hours of LeMinis. And if you haven't heard of that, it's a 24-hour endurance race with mini bikes and other sketchy vehicles. Case in point. I dragged this thing out of the weeds at midnight, literally the day before, and it made it to about over there and died because the carburetor was flooding out, and then the battery died. So I had to basically clean out that carburetor, over there in the mud at midnight with a flashlight. I'm sure my neighbors absolutely love me at this point. But we did manage to get it onto the trailer, and we got it to the event. Now, this was meant to be more of a joke, something to laugh at, honestly, but the track was so muddy, and it actually ended up doing pretty well, so I rode it pretty much the whole time. I didn't do the full 24 hours because I'm one guy, but I did ride it, and I was not gentle on it. Let's put it that way. I was jumping this thing, I was sliding it around sideways. Probably wouldn't have done that if I remembered just how bad the frame was, but I did it. At one point I actually did roll it over on its side, and my immediate gut reaction to that was to yell, "I'm fine, roll me back over," and then I took off again. Now, I did have a few issues during the event. Some of them were pre-existing problems that got worse, and some of them were brand new. Now, the first is the enricher. Now, the enricher is what the gy6s have instead of a choke or a primer. The problem with it before the event even started was that you have to jump it straight to 12 volts to get it to function. And even then, it kind of had a mind of its own. It would either work or it didn't. Just completely random when that happened. So it either ran pig rich or it ran exactly the way it was supposed to. Next problem is this tire came off the bead and the rim was just spinning inside of it. So our solution to that was to just stuff a bunch of air into it. So basically, it is just rock hard so that it stays on that rim. And that does reduce traction a bit, but I was okay with it because it meant I could slide it around corners easier. We also broke the muffler at some point in the first day. Somebody booger welded it at some point, and the booger welds broke because this came off. It was just kind of sitting here rubbing on the axle. So I threw another bolt in it and called it good. Now, with an hour left, oh yeah, I also pulled the wire out of the regulator at one point, so it sputtered, died, and then couldn't start again. With an hour left to go in the event, the spark went weak. I don't know if it's the CDI, I don't know if it's the stator because it's an AC CDI, but either way, I didn't really have time to deal with that, so I did this super quick and dirty DC CDI conversion, which is why you have to jump this to a battery positive to get it to run, and why you have to disconnect it to make it stop running. But it survived for the last hour of the event. Now, this one I'm surprised it even actually worked. So my friend was riding it, and the chain came off of him, and when I stopped to look at it, I noticed that the master link had come apart. I had the side link, but I did not have the clip. The flagger told us we had about 10 minutes left, and I did not run that thing all day just to not cross the finish line. So I took it back to my camp and I wrapped the master link in duct tape to keep it together. And I went out there and I wailed on it, and I got about 7 laps in, and I saw the duct tape laying in the middle of the course, and I decided to just keep going. So about 3 laps and the checkered flag later, this is what the master link looks like. The side link is gone. The clip is long gone. It was just barely holding together, but it survived. Now, we thought that we escaped without any major structural damage, but that turned out to not be the case. Once I got it cleaned off, I started looking at things and I said to myself, something doesn't seem right. So the tire is not supposed to hit the frame rail. And I don't know if you can see this, but that frame rail, which holds the suspension, is now bent. Now, I don't know if that's when I went 2 feet over a corner and went on 2 wheels, or when I rolled it, but either way, the frame is bent now. It will need to be braced up. I also figured out why one side always felt lower than the other. There's no bushings left in the shocks. But it still does run. So obviously it needs a little bit more work before it's going to be doing anything else. But hopefully it will make it out to more events in the future. She still runs pretty good, all things considered.